Thank you all so much for coming, and it is great to see all of your lovely faces. Special thanks to Ben Harris, who is the chair of the Delegate Selection Plan Committee, for graciously supporting us and being here to answer questions. He has worked very, very hard, and so hopefully me walking through this is a helpful addition to that work. My hope is that I'm going to start with the assumption that people don't necessarily know all the details about how this works. So for those of you who are old hat at this, bear with me. You're going to have to listen to some things you already knew. Just feel smart the whole time I'm explaining them. And I ask that you spread this information to other people as well, and see that as your responsibility and something that you are fully empowered and able to do. Please take that on. I see lots of smarty pants people here, so I know you can do that. All right. And I will have to pause periodically to let people into the meeting room. So thanks for your patience with that. All right, so we are here to talk about the 2024 Delegate Selection Plan. I have here for your consideration because the Delegate Selection Plan is currently in a draft format or a proposed format. The Delegate Selection Plan Committee, chaired by Ben Harris, our Vice Chair for County Affairs, met and established this plan, put forward this plan, and we're now in the 30-day comment period. So during the 30 days, I think it's between April 3rd and May 3rd, the public is invited to comment and send feedback to the party about this plan. And while I don't imagine there's going to be dramatic feedback, I think it's important that we be transparent and give people the opportunity to provide feedback if they have it. We're going to walk through the plan today and talk about how to send your feedback to Ben, but he's also here to hear it in person himself. Okay, so what is a delegate selection plan? The plan outlines the process by which delegates are selected to represent Alabama at the 2024 Democratic National Convention. That's the answer, but if you don't know what a Democratic National Convention does, that's not a very helpful answer. So let's talk a little bit about a Democratic National Convention and what does it mean to be a delegate. And then we'll dig into how delegates are chosen. We'll talk about the fact that this plan is not necessarily final. We're in that feedback time, and we'll talk about how you can be involved both now and later on in the process. I should also say this meeting is being recorded. So if you're not comfortable being recorded, feel free to turn off your whatever. I don't think the cameras get recorded, but if that makes you uncomfortable, I want to make sure you're aware of that so that we can share this with other people after the fact. Okay, so let's start by talking about what is a Democratic National Convention. A Democratic National Convention is the event where the party officially nominates a candidate to be president and vice president. It's also where we adopt a comprehensive party platform across the country. And the intention is that it's a rally and an opportunity to unify the party around a particular candidate and platform. So since the 1980s, the conventions have held a little less weight than they used to. With the rise of primaries, the Democratic nominee is pretty well known. It's usually very clear who the nominee is going to be by the time we get to the convention. So a lot of what happens is more formality than decision making by the time the convention happens. So more of a rally and a party, a celebration to get behind the candidate than anything else at this point. So each state, plus District of Columbia, territories, et cetera, gets to send delegates to the convention. And those delegates are pledged to particular candidates, and those delegates then are there to vote on who becomes the presidential nominee. So again, the number of delegates that we send is determined based on the population of Alabama, the Democratic population of Alabama. And then the amount of delegates that we send that are going to vote for a particular candidate is based on the results of our primary. So we'll talk some more about that, how candidates end up, or how delegates end up pledged to a particular candidate. There are also unpledged delegates, and we'll talk a little bit more about who those people are. Unpledged delegates are the people that you've often heard referred to as superdelegates. They aren't accountable to a particular, they aren't pledged to a particular candidate, and they are party officials, kind of the party, the word I'm looking for, they're the establishment. So those are folks who have positions within the party or are elected officials, and they used to have more of a role, and particularly after the 2016 election, 2016 primary between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, the Democratic National Committee agreed to reduce the role that superdelegates play in selection. So we'll talk some more about that. All right. So now let's dig in on how delegates are chosen. And we'll also talk about some of the other things that are connected to the delegate selection plan that are not exactly delegates. Questions thus far? We have a chat. If you want to put questions in the chat, feel free to do so. Ben, do you want to say anything more about the process?
No, I think you covered it very well. I just wanted to first thank everybody for being here. So keep going with this. You're making my job easy, and I appreciate it.
Happy to do it. All right. Okay, so there are these 4 key types of delegates. There are district level delegates, and the district there is the congressional district. So there are 7 congressional districts in Alabama, and 34 of our delegates will be elected at the congressional district level. And we'll get into more depth on those. Then there are the automatic party leaders and elected official delegates. So we call these folks PLEOs, P-L-E-Os, party leader and elected officials. So if you want to sound cool at parties, you can talk about PLEOs. And that's who we're talking about. And when the word automatic is there, those are folks who are not pledged. So these are the superdelegates. Then we have the pledged party leaders and elected officials. So that's another round of kind of folks who are already party leaders in some way. Oh, I have a question for you, Ben, already. So I see here that it says that there are 7 automatic party leader and elected official delegates. But I think that number is determined by the DNC, and it could change. So I think 7 is what we're at right now.
Correct.
Am I right that could change?
There is, for anybody who's a real political nerd, there is a formal call that the DNC puts out. That's the name of the document, the call. And that's where these numbers, these total numbers come from. And yes, they are, prepared by the DNC and presumably at least subject to potential change, although I suspect that's unlikely.
Were something to radically happen and we would all of a sudden have a Democratic governor, for example, that might change. Correct. Or if all of a sudden Joe Biden declared residency in the state of Alabama, that could change.
Correct. I mean, for example, one of the automatic delegates is the Democratic member of Congress from Alabama. We just have one, unfortunately. She's terrific, but we just have one. If somehow we got another, then there would be two and not one. So that's one way to do it.
Indeed. So the pledged party leaders and elected officials, pledged PLEOs, are selected by the SDEC, and but it's selected from folks who qualify as a PLEO. Then last but not least, we have our at-large delegates and at-large alternates. So we'll get 11 at-large delegates. So those are folks who can run from anywhere in the state. It doesn't matter what district you're in, and you don't have to be a party leader or elected official as so defined. Anyone can run for those seats. Priority is given to folks who are from minority communities. If we are not already meeting our diversity goals, that is an opportunity to meet those goals. And all of our alternates, all 4 of our alternates, will be elected that way. And they're elected by the State Democratic Executive Committee. So the part where there's the most public input is those 34 delegates who are elected from the districts, and those happen via the primary. So a little bit on our primary process. The primary will be on March 5th, 2024. The deadline to register to vote in that primary is February 19th. So if someone wants to have a say in this, they need to be registered by February 19th. And if you want to be a delegate, you have to qualify to be a delegate by November 10th of 2023. So that's when qualifying ends. That's the last day when you can submit the paperwork to have your name on the primary ballot to be a district level delegate. So the district level delegates, do I have it in here? Yeah, here we go. District level delegates. So district level delegates are the number of delegates per district is based on the Democratic electorate in that district. So you can see that our most Democratic congressional district is District 7. That's the district that elects Representative Terry Sewell. And so that district gets 8 representatives, 8 delegates. Whereas our less Democratic friendly districts get fewer delegates because there are fewer Democrats in those districts. So find your district on the list and see how many delegates you're going to get. You'll see that they are further broken down by male and female. So let's take a minute and talk about gender non-binary as well. So as a general rule, the policy of the party is that we want gender balance, and we simplify that to 50-50. And so the goal will be to have a party that every party body is balanced according to gender. Gender non-binary are not counted when we count how many males. When we count how many males and how many females, we want those 2 numbers to be as close as possible to 50-50. Non-binary people don't count in that. You can have as many non-binary people as you want, and it doesn't tip the scales in favor of male or tip the scales in favor of female. So if you had 12 slots that were available on a committee, and you had 5 men, 5 women, and 2 binary people, you're good. If you had 6 men, 5 women, and 1 non-binary person, that's good. What you can't have is 8 men, 2 women, and 2 non-binary people. That would not be balanced. So the balance is between male and female. It doesn't take into account non-binary. Does that make sense? I feel like I've had a lot of questions about that over the years. So the goal here is the expectation is that we'll have 3 males and 2 females from district number 1. If a non-binary person were to get, were to be the highest vote getter, if a non-binary person ran in district 1 and had the most number of votes, that person would get a seat. And then the number, the next highest vote getter would be selected next, and it would alternate then between male and female. As Ben and I were discussing earlier today, this cannot be 100% fair. It may be that women just get more votes than men, but we're still going to make sure that there's gender balance in each district. And it's an imperfect system. We had to pick, Ben had to pick which districts were going to have more males than females and which districts were going to have more females than males. And it's an imperfect, it's not a science. They had to make those decisions, and I don't envy them making those decisions. But the goal is at the end of the day that our delegation as a whole from Alabama will be gender balanced and will be diverse.
Question.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they're non-binary, how do is there like a special section that's going to be on the, I guess, qualifying form for them with that?
You want to answer that, Ben?
Yeah, well, I was going to say yes. And I'm Josh, I'm doing this mostly off of memory, but yes, the qualifying form I think will allow you to designate as non-binary. So I think when you qualify, that's when you've got to say, which category.
And then on the primary ballot, you will see people are grouped according to male or female or non-binary. There'll be those categories, I think. Somebody speak up if they think differently, but I believe that's how it has worked. It is not, however, as simple as just running as a delegate. When you run as a delegate, you're running during the presidential primary. So the voter is going to see a presidential primary ballot that says Joe Biden, Kennedy, I don't know, Howard. We're going to make up some person named Howard. So they see Biden, Kennedy, Howard, and they'll also see an option for uncommitted. So if you don't know who you want at the time of the primary, you can still show up to the primary and vote for uncommitted. People don't do that very often, but you can do it. And here's why it's important. Every delegate who runs needs to identify which candidate they're with. So you don't just run as, I couldn't run as Tabitha Eisner, just myself. I would run as Tabitha Eisner, a pledged delegate for Biden. And then only voters who select Biden as their presidential primary choice would have the option of selecting me as their delegate. If you select Kennedy as your presidential choice, you must select a Kennedy delegate. You cannot select a Biden delegate or a Howard delegate. So, so you have to make that commitment at the time that you're qualifying. So again, to be a delegate, you have to submit a qualifying form by November 10th. And that qualifying form will ask for your gender, and it will also ask which candidate you are pledging your support to. And you must choose Biden, Kennedy, Howard, whoever that is, or uncommitted. So if you choose to run for uncommitted, then the only people who can vote for you for delegate are people who also chose uncommitted as their presidential choice.
Yeah, just to chime in, I mean,
please.
I think the logic there is obvious, but your best chance to get elected is to be in this instance, it would be with Biden. That doesn't mean you have to, but it your best chance to go would be to be a pledged Biden delegate. But for the obvious reasons.
Right. And who knows what will change between now and then, but chances are in a re-election, if the incumbent's running for re-election.
So if somebody ran undecided, and nobody votes for them, do they automatically become a delegate, or how does that work?
No. Well, Tabitha, I don't want to step on it.
No, go for it.
Unless another candidate unless another candidate achieves 15% of the vote in a particular district, Biden's going to get all the delegates. The uncommitted, Josh, I'd have to look. I mean, much of this is a DNC form. Uncommitted would be about the toughest way to get there. And I'd have to look. I would assume that would have to do with maybe nobody getting 15%, but so I think your best
Uncommitted could hypothetically get 15%, right, Ben?
hypothetically,
Yeah.
uncommitted could get 15%, but that seems very, very, very unlikely. So,
And with only 5 delegates, if there were 5 candidates and each one of them got 20% of the vote, each one of them would get 1 delegate.
Right.
More likely, Biden will get 80% of the vote, and maybe Kennedy gets 20% of the vote. So then Biden would get 4 delegates, 4 out of the 5 delegates, and Kennedy would get the 5th delegate.
But if Kennedy gets 14%, Biden gets all 5.
Correct.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Okay, so that's how district delegates are elected. And the top vote getter. So again, if Biden were going to get all 5 of the votes, all 5 of the delegates in District 1, the top vote getter would be the first selected. The top male vote getter would get in. I can make it even simpler. I think the top 3 male vote getters that ran as Biden delegates would be selected as Biden delegates, and the top 2 women would get to be Biden delegates. The top 2 women who ran for Biden, pledged to Biden, would get to be delegates. So it gets more complicated if we have a crowded field, but on a year like this, where we're not likely to, hopefully these are all very simple math problems for you, Ben. Okay, so that's how district delegates work. And then, so then we have the automatic party leaders, the automatic PLOs, and that's going to be all the members of the DNC. So that's the chair and the vice chair. And Alabama has 2 elected DNC representatives. That's Caroline Self and Josh Coleman. And then anyone else who is a member of the DNC by virtue of something else that's going on. So Charlie Staton is a member of the DNC because of his role in a DNC committee. And anybody else? Who am I forgetting, Ben?
I'm drawing a blank. We have 6. According to the call, and I am drawing a blank because I came up with those 5 as well. But we are allocated 6, and I've got to look and see who the 6th person is.
And then the 7th is Terry Sewell.
Correct.
So that would be our automatic PLOs, and those folks do not have to commit to a candidate, do not have to pledge themselves to a candidate. Then the pledged party leaders and elected officials. So these are people who, in order to qualify, let me get the exact rules here. Okay, so these would be big city mayors, statewide elected officials, if we had any, state legislative leaders, state legislators, other state, county, and local elected officials and party leaders. Those folks are all eligible to run for a PLO delegate seat. They have to qualify with the party, but they don't qualify on the same schedule as the district level delegates. They would qualify by May 15th of 2024. And they would have to pledge themselves to a particular presidential candidate. Notably, this would be after the primary has happened. So they already know who won the primary in Alabama. So they will probably be pledging themselves only to candidates who have won at least 15% of the electorate here in Alabama. So they would indicate their presidential preference. Oh, another thing we should say here is that when we're talking about presidential preference, so let's say I was a known trash talker about Joe Biden. I'm not, but let's say I was known to be a trash talker about Joe Biden, and I want to run to be a Joe Biden delegate. Biden's team could say, no, not Tabitha. We don't trust her. We don't like her. She's out. So they have a right to refuse a delegate who they don't want to be representing them. So when you file if you're going to file to be a district level delegate or a PLEO, you'll want to make sure, if possible, you'll want to talk to the presidential candidate's team, to their authorized representatives, and make sure they don't have a problem with you. Give them a chance to vet you, get to know you, feel good about you representing them, because they do have the right to refuse someone if they don't like, if they don't think you're going to be a reliable or qualified or respectable representative of their team. And that's true even for PLEOs. PLEOs could be rejected by presidential candidates, just the same as district delegates. And the state party will have a record of who the presidential candidates' representatives are. So I think you could call the party and find out who the appropriate person is to talk to about that if you were wanting to run. And then those pledged PLEOs are going to be allocated. So again, if Biden gets 75% of the primary votes, then Biden delegates will make up 75% of these 7 pledged PLEOs. So you have to do some math there and some rounding to figure out what 75% of 7 is. But that's how those delegates will be distributed. All right. And then the at-large delegates also aren't being elected via the district level process. They're being elected via a separate process much later. So you qualify by May 15th to run for one of those seats. And then rather than, the primary's over, so you're not going to be on the primary ballot, you'll be up for consideration by the State Democratic Executive Committee when the SDEC meets in June of 2024. So that meeting date has already been set, June 8th, 2024. SDEC will have a nice long meeting where we'll be voting on pledged PLEOs and we'll be voting on at-large delegates and at-large alternates. And the same thing with at-large, you have to pledge yourself to a candidate. That candidate has the right to say, we don't want them representing us. And then there'll be an election and those delegate seats will be awarded proportionally based on the percentage of the vote that the presidential candidate got. Questions? All right. If there are no questions on that part, then we will move on. So there's also all of this, I should say, is in this document. Let me pull that over here. So this is the Alabama Delegate Selection Plan for the 2024 Democratic National Convention, and as drafted by the committee that Ben led. And it's a pretty long document. I encourage you to read it, but I wanted to go through, summarize it because it's a lot to ask people to read 44 pages or 41 pages of stuff. So I'll do it for you. I'm trying to highlight all the things that I think are interesting, controversial, unexpected. But really, this is the same plan that we have had in previous years. Pretty much the same. So in here, you can find the charts of district level delegate numbers. And it goes into all the details about including replacement of delegates, how alternates are used. So one thing that I think we should probably talk about is the fact that if you are selected as a delegate, you put all this effort into becoming a delegate, then what? Then the expectation is that you're going to come to this event in Chicago, August of 2024. Currently, the party does not pay for you to attend that conference in Chicago over the course of several days. So one thing that we've talked about is this isn't terribly inclusive in terms of socioeconomics. So, we're making all of these efforts to make sure that the delegation is going to be racially diverse and gender diverse. But if you can't afford to go to Chicago for 5 days, staying in a hotel and paying for all that stuff, it is difficult to be inclusive to people who don't have the money to pay for that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that's not an Alabama Democratic Party thing or just a this convention thing. That is, unfortunately, that is how this works. And so that is an important point to get out at the outset. I personally wish it were different. Perhaps I do not in any way want to promise, but I know there's some good people thinking about that. But you need to operate on the assumption that if you are elected, you are A, expected to go, and B, expected to pay your own way, and C, be able to be off work for those days, because they are weekdays. And most folks have to work on the weekdays. And so be aware of that. I personally was rooting for Atlanta. I don't know if I should say that, but I was, because it's just easier for us to get there. But Chicago won. So it's a big trip and it's not cheap. And everybody just needs to be aware of that. You are basically taking a 5-day vacation roughly in the city of Chicago. And so just be aware of that.
And with that many people coming to Chicago, hotel rooms are going to be expensive. In order to get a cheaper hotel room, or even to get a hotel room at all, you may be staying 30 minutes away from the convention center, and transportation. They try to do shuttles, but it does take time still.
And to add to that, and without speaking, for what the DNC may do here, I believe the delegations are allocated hotel space. There's certain hotels that and there are negotiated rates that'll just be the rates. Generally speaking, the larger and bluer delegations get the hotels that are closer to everything. And I'm going to say, the convention in Milwaukee, which was the only one that I've actually been a delegate to, was in 2020, but it was virtual because of COVID. Had it been in person, right? The convention was in Milwaukee. The Alabama hotel was at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. And so understand that's what, you may be taking a very long, and this is something to underscore, and we discussed this as part of the committee. Don't assume that hotel is going to be next door to the arena. That's thing one. Thing two, these are very long days. You go, I think you get there, roughly late morning, midday. And the big events that everybody sees on TV are at night, and that's where the big popular speeches are. But there's a whole lot that goes on from noon until prime time. you're there for all of it if you are a delegate. And you're there to the bitter end that night. You don't have a choice about leaving. And then you get back on the bus and you may have a 90-minute bus ride back to the hotel. And then you get up the next morning, there's usually a delegation breakfast, and then off you go again. So this is quite a commitment, and we want to make sure folks understand what they're getting into, so that if you know what you're getting into, then you go into it as, and we would love to have you, but just be aware that's where this is.
Patricia, I see your hands up.
Yeah, thanks, Tabitha. I want to thank you for walking us through this too. I've been to a number of conventions, and they Alabama will be assigned a hotel, and they do provide buses to take you to where the convention site is, but and take you back to the hotel after the convention. The party usually will have a breakfast every morning with a speaker that will, so you don't have to worry about that breakfast. And then there are usually workshops during the day, just to increase your knowledge about activism, voting rights, that kind of thing. So you don't have to participate in those, but there are caucus meetings during the day too. Like the LGBTQ caucus will have a meeting. And what I did is, because I didn't have the money, I went to the one in Denver and one in, I can't even remember now, but I just did a little fundraising campaign, and people donated, $100 here and there to pay for me to go. So it's, and I'm not going to run for a delegate. But I'm willing to help anybody put that kind of little campaign together to raise money for you to go, because I do think it's important that we have a diverse representation of people, that it's not just, people with money that can afford to go. So, yeah, but Ben, you're right. This is, paying for food in your hotel, which is a discounted rate, but you need to sign up quickly for one of the rooms because they only get so many allocations of rooms to do that. So, but anyway, I just want to throw that in.
Thank you. All right, so let's talk a little bit then about a couple other items that are related. So the majority of this process, I think we think of as the delegates themselves, but the delegation is also going to have provide people to be standing committee members. So at the convention, there are these standing committees, and Alabama gets to put some people on those committees. Those people don't actually have to be delegates or alternates. They could be coming just to be members of those committees. My guess is that they will be delegates or alternates, but they don't have to be. And those committees may meet prior to the convention itself. And so we have to pick those people to be committee members before this whole process is finished. So we have temporary committee members until we can be a full delegation and officially select our permanent committee members. So that is in this document as well on page 20. And we can get into all of that, but I'm gonna leave it be at that, in case people, unless you want to talk about it some more. There's also then the delegation chair. So the full delegation, all the people who have been elected as delegates via any of those 4 categories, the district delegates, the automatic plegos, the pledged plegos, and the at-large delegates, all of those folks will get together on June 8th of 2024, and they will select a chair for the delegation. So that doesn't get decided until kind of the last minute. And we also would be selecting at that time 3 individuals who would serve as pages. So these would be I think these are often young people who kind of run errands and get some kind of intern experience at the convention. Ben, by the way, there is a discrepancy in the document. In one place it says 2 pages, and another place it says 3. So that's something. To
Yeah,
just check.
thanks for pointing that out. That it is the correct number is 3. And there was a last minute edit, not because the number changed, but because we had 2, and I thought we had gotten it all out, but that will be corrected obviously before this is submitted.
Yeah, I'll send you a couple other little things like that I found that were just like, I bet that's a typo. One of the things that I noticed was sometimes it's a little unclear whether things will be selected by the chair or by the executive board or by the SDEC as a whole. So that's another thing that I think is kind of interesting. So that's true for the convention standing committee members. That seems a little bit unclear there. And then also this whole process includes the selection of presidential electors. So these are the people who are going to be members of the Electoral College. And that doesn't happen until December. So the general election happens, and then based on the outcome of the general election in Alabama, the Secretary of State identifies who will be the electors sent to the Electoral College. If the Democrat wins, it's the electors selected by the Democratic Party. If the Republican wins, it's the electors selected by the Republican Party. So, but those people, there are 9 electors because there are 9 electoral votes here in Alabama. So we have to select 9 electors who would serve in that role should we have a win in the state. So those people would cast their ballots at the Electoral College on December 16th. And those people are nominated by the SDEC and voted on by the executive board or maybe the chair. I don't know, that part was a little unclear to me in this document. But that's it's an honorary role. It is possible to not vote for who you're supposed to. That's called a faithless elector. But generally people vote for who they're supposed to vote for when you're an elector in the Electoral College. Questions about that? Okay. Okay, so delegation chair, pages, committee members, those things all fall under this plan as well. And then there is the affirmative action plan and the outreach and inclusion program. So this begins on page 29. Look away if you get dizzy. Oh, all right, so section 8 of this document is the affirmative action plan, outreach and inclusion program. And this is all about attempts to make sure that the party, that the delegation that we send is representative of the Democrats in Alabama and the people of Alabama more broadly. And, you know, our values say we want to make sure that we are including people regardless of race, sex, age, color, creed, national origin, religion, ethnic identity, sexual orientation, gender identity, economic status, and disability. We've already said, gosh, it's hard to include people who are of a lower socioeconomic status because we don't have a fund set up to cover people's costs for this event. Certainly harder for people with disabilities to make the trip, but we want to make it as open as possible. And, you know, I think we want to make sure that not only do we have a diverse delegation, but that we have diverse participation in this process, and that everyone feels like they understand how this process works. One of my pet peeves, as many of you know, is that the inner workings of the party feel totally confusing to the vast majority of Democrats in Alabama. They don't understand how all this happens. They just see that there's all of a sudden a national convention happening and Alabama is called and the TV cameras show a picture of a bunch of Alabama people casting votes, but there's very little understanding of how those people got to be there. So I think to the extent possible, we want to make sure people understand how this process works and that when they show up on primary day, they understand what the consequence of their decisions are and hopefully know who their candidates are so that they can choose wisely and so that we don't end up with a delegation that is not representative of our community. So I think this is particularly worth review. And there are lots of good plans in here, including making meetings really transparent and open to the public, communicating to the public about when meetings are happening and how they can participate. And that's really important, but not something that I think we've been very good at. So that's an area where I will be focusing a lot of my attention. And I hope that you all will join me in trying to make this whole process as transparent and accessible to people as possible, because we certainly have not done a good job of communicating that. Okay, so the last thing that I just want to say is that this document is posted on the Alabama Democrats website. If you go there, it's right in the middle at the top, a link to it. And I hope that you will go check it out and that you will send feedback to Ben. Obviously, he's here right now, so you can tell him things right now. But also, if you'd rather put your feedback in writing or call him to talk about it, he gave me permission to give out his information. And all feedback needs to be received ASAP because we are, I think, Ben, you can confirm probably, we're voting on this at the SDEC meeting on the 6th. Do you think?
That I need to confirm with the chair and the executive board as to whether we would be voting then, but we certainly intend to for it to be final, this is the 30-day comment window. So after that, it will be final and submitted as rapidly as possible.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, it would be great if we could send it out to county chairs now so that they could provide feedback on it. I didn't know that it had been posted until somebody told me about it a couple of weeks after it had already been put on the website. So again, I think that's an example of where we're not always good at communicating to people what we're up to, and that ends up feeling to people like we don't care about their opinions. And so if we want to communicate to people that their input matters, we just need to make sure that we're doing that proactive communication to reach people and invite them in. One of the things that I'll start, one of the pieces of feedback that I want to give is that the affirmative action plan says that there'll be workshops conducted to explain this plan, and that those workshops and materials will be made available, and that will start in September of 2023. My concern is that the deadline for qualifying as a delegate is November 10th. So if we don't start communicating about this until September, mid-September, I think is September 13th, I think was the date given. I don't know if that's enough time for people to get the information, comprehend, digest it, and make a decision about whether they're going to run for a delegate position. So if we want to have a diverse set of delegates, I think we need to be communicating sooner about what the process is and how it works, in hopes that people will be able to have their qualifying forms in by November 10th. So there's my feedback. Anyone else want to give some feedback?
I think Amber has a question in the chat, which is, will the delegate qualifying form eventually be up on the website? think, but I don't want to get ahead of the chair of the executive board. I suspect that form will be handled in the way that the qualifying forms for all of the other offices are handled. I know that in 2020, Tabitha, correct me if I'm wrong, it was possible to qualify, I believe, online, and so that's some answer to that question, but that's something the state party will have to set down the road. So and to Hayden's point in the chat, where the September date and I think there are other dates in here they are keyed in the DNC document off of when qualifying ends. But in any, so that's where they came from, noting that point.
But we can start earlier, right? We're not like, DNC is not saying you may not start earlier.
I'm not aware that they're saying you may not start earlier, and regardless of what the date is, obviously efforts like this and other efforts to communicate are certainly something that we need to be doing. So what the final date ends up being in terms of what, the formal efforts and all of that does not mean that we can't all, do our best to communicate this out as effectively as possible.
One other thing that I noticed, oh, Hayden, you have your hand up. Was that for what you put in the chat or something else?
No, I just wasn't sure. I didn't hear it covered. When you fill out your paperwork to run as a delegate, there is a $50 donation to the party that is requested. It's not required, but it is requested. So people need to be aware that that is a cost that you have to pay up front to run.
Or we'd like you to pay up front.
Yes.
Thanks. The other thing that I don't know if Virginia's still on, but I noticed that the affirmative action plan also notes that Native American representatives or Native American delegates are asked to provide documentation of tribal membership. And I know that's something that has been discussed or debated within the Native American community about whether that's appropriate.
Can you hear me?
No, not really. I can tell you're talking, but I can't really hear you.
I'll put it in the chat.
I'm guessing she's going to put a comment in the chat. Also worth noting, on the very last pages of this document are a super helpful timetable. So I encourage you all to have this handy. So this makes it clear when things are happening, what are the deadlines. We are heading quickly for public comment period ending on May 2nd. And then it says the state party is going to review these comments and adopt the revised plan. So again, I'm guessing that's going to be at the SDAC meeting on the 6th rather than on the 2nd, but not totally clear about that. And then state party needs to be doing affirmative action by the 3rd. My understanding is that it's by the 13th, but yeah, this is the deadline by which implementation must begin. That could certainly happen sooner. And then we have November 10th. I don't know why November 8th is here, kind of out of order, but November 10th is the deadline for delegates to file. Then the presidential candidates can roll people out. Then on March 5th, we'll have the primary. And then we won't do our additional Clio delegates and at-large delegates and alternates until June 8th. Okay, so there you go. That is the delegate selection plan and affirmative action plan, inclusion and outreach program. So many words. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Ben, for being here. And Hayden was also on the committee. Anyone else who was on the committee that I didn't acknowledge? I'm not clear on who was on the committee, so.
I would say I can't see everybody on this, but I do have my handy list of the committee. And if you are on, in addition to Hayden, thank you. And thank you, Hayden, for all of your work on this, and to all of you who've reached out to me. I appreciate everybody's commitment and involvement. And I see Virginia has put her comment in the chat. And Virginia, thank you for that.
Awesome. All right, please read, please send feedback. Please tell everyone you know that this is happening. It's an important process and an opportunity for us to engage more people in the party, which is certainly something we need to do. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
for
Thank
being
you all so much.
here. All right, have a great one.
Thanks, everybody.